Hello my crafty friends, it's Beverly here over at Crafting Chaos, and I'm here showing you how to make another interactive card. You've already seen the preview of the finished card and I hope you'll have a go at it. And obviously you can use lots and lots of different stamps and different themes, whatever you fancy. But I'm going to go with the one that we've got today, and we're going to start off by making the mechanism itself. The mechanism is made in 3 parts and we're going to do that now. So the first thing I'm doing, oh, and by the way, I am using the Canvas Workspace downloadable version in this case. So what I'm going to do, excuse me, is I'm going to bring on a basic square, and I'm just going to bring that so that I can see. I've also going to draw your attention to a couple of settings that I've got on. Oops, didn't mean to do that. What I've got is I've got it on show matte image, show the grid and snap to grid, and I've got the grid spacing set at 0.5 inches, and that will make life easier for us later on. So now when we move it, it's going to move the square along onto that grid. Now, but before we do, you'll understand why it's easier once we get onto that stage. Now we need to resize the square to 1.5 by 1.5 inches. So I'm going to put the maintain aspect ratio is checked and type in 1.5, say OK, and that will give us a 1.5 square. So now if I select it, you can see when I move it, it's going to move it and it's going to snap it to that next grid line ½ inch across, and you'll understand later why that's important. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to make a duplicate. So I'm going to right click and hit duplicate, and I'm just going to move it to the side away from that shape for a second, and we're going to change the size to 0.75 inches. So that's effectively making a square like so. So I'm just going to make sure that we've snapped to grid, and I'm going to move this across so that it lines up with the top of the square and the side of the square there. I can click on it to make sure I've got that one on top, select both, and I'm going to go on to I'm on this second one down the edit menu, if you will, and I'm going to hit subtract. Okay, now it doesn't look like it's done anything, but it's actually subtracted that small square from the bigger square, and if we just put a little bit of colour into that, you'll be able to see what it's done. Okay, so that's the first part of the mechanism completed. Now we're going to move on to the second part of our mechanism, and I'm going to again bring on a square, although this time I actually want it to be a rectangle. So again, second one down, and I'm going to select this edit menu, and I'm going to change the ticked maintain aspect ratio and turn that off. And I need to make this part 3.5 inches wide, like so, and also 1 inch high. So 3.5 by 1. So that's sorting that one out, if you will, and again that's where we're up to. But now we need to do some scoring, and this is where you're going to see why it's much easier to use the snap to grid function. So I'm just going to bring on, using this icon, the path tool, and I want to draw a straight line. I'm just going to double click, and we can see at the minute that's no width with 1 height, which is what we want. We want it to be 1 inch high. Now these fine lines that you can see are set at, if we'll go to this, we've got them set at 0.5 intervals, and I need to move this line over to the where it would be measuring 1 inch from this side. So all I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to leave it as a cutting line, but I want it to be a perforating line. So that's what you can see. I've actually selected that now, and all I'm going to do now is, using my arrow keys, it's going to move this along until I get it lined up exactly where I want it, like so. Now if I just edit undo, because I am going to need 3 of those. So I'm just going to select it. I'm going to right click and, oh, sorry, done that. I'm going to select it, and while it's selected, I'm going to layer and duplicate. And then I'm going to layer and duplicate again. So now I'm just going to shunt that up so that it's snapped to the grid. And I'm going to select that one, move that one up and select it so it's shunted to the grid. So again, this is just helping us to line things up. So I'm moving across now back to that 1 inch mark, and I'm going to select the second one, move that along to the 2 inch mark, and finally this one we're going to move along to the 3 inch mark, all from that end. So it'll be 1 inch from that end, 2 inch from that end, 3 inch from that end, and then at the end you're going to have a 1/2 inch strip. So now that we don't want anything to get moved and messed about, so we're going to select all of that shape that we've just created, and we're going to go on to layer, and we're going to group. Okay, so now I can move part 2 of the mechanism without disturbing the score lines. So now we're going to get on to part 3 of the mechanism, and this is the most complicated part, although it's not too difficult if you follow the procedure carefully. So again, we're going to need to bring on a square, and I'm just going to close that. No, I'm going to bring on the triangle whilst I'm in, and it's this first triangle selection you want, the equilateral triangle, but I'm just going to leave that to one side for now. I'm going to zoom in so you can see what we're working on, and we're working on this at the moment. We've got it on snap to grid, and we're going to move that down to 0.5 inches. So now we're going to resize our square. So again, I'm going to go on the second one down, and with the maintain aspect ratio unselected, we're going to make it 4 inches wide and 1 inch high, like so. So now we've got our a rectangle. We're going to take a duplicate of that by right click and duplicate, or you can go layer duplicate, whichever. And again, we need to resize, and it needs to be 0.5 inches high by 1 3/4 or 1.75 in this. Oh, try again. Just deleted it by accident. So again, we're going to select that, and it needs to be 1.75 in length. So we've got it 1.75 by 0.5 inches, and I'm just moving it along using the snap to grid feature till I've got it at the upper left and also lined at the top. So now I'm going to select everything and hit subtract. What I'm going to do then is put a little bit of colour into the shape so you can see that it's done that subtraction. Okay. Now what it seems to have done, and if it does this with you, just double click and access the nodes. We've got an extra one there that we don't need, so I'm just, oh, not that one. Oh, for some reason it sent the square to the bottom. So if we layer and ungroup, let's have a look at in the layers palette what we've got. So we're on that group, so let's reveal what we're in. And we've got, let's toggle off and see what we've got. Let's just make that visible again. We're on the wrong shape. So we're on this one, but this one for some reason seems to have a square underneath it, and I'm not entirely sure why. Because it's done what I wanted it to do, but it's left that behind. So let's just edit undo that. Let's try and get the node that we want. Might be better if we zoom in and we can see better what we're hitting. So I'm going to double click, select the nodes. I'm having a problem today with the nodes. It's clearly not that one. And yet the triangle, the rectangle is still there. So it's very bizarre. It shouldn't be doing this. I do apologise, I don't know. Perhaps if we just start that bit again and see if it does it again. So again, I'm going to... It's bothering me that this line's still there. Okay, so let's just delete that. Not all, everything. Just select that and delete it, and we'll start again with a rectangle. And we'll make it 1 inch. There are some glitches in the software and there doesn't really seem to be any rhyme or reason for them. And we need it to be 1.5 inches wide. No, 1.75 inches wide. Say OK. We're going to duplicate it when I get it again. And this one needs to be 4 wide by 1. Okay, so now make sure we layer, arrange, bring to the front. Select both, and we'll just try doing it lining left and to the top. And then we'll just make sure that that one is on top. Select both, and we're going to subtract. And it's done it perfectly this time. I have no clue why it did that last time. We'll just put it with some colour in, and then you can see. Okay, so that's that part done. We now need to add a score line that's 3/4 of an inch from this side. So I'm going to use the path icon. I'm going to double click. I'm going to make it a dash line. And then I'm going to move it along using my snap to grid function. And I need it to be 1.75. So when I get to there, just did it at that to make it quicker. I'm going to reduce it to 0.25 so that I can really... So that's... Let's zoom in so we can see what we're doing. So we need that line to be on the 1, 2, and we need it to go one more in. That's on the 2 line. For some reason we need it to be at 1 3/4, so we're on 1, 2, 3. So that should be 1.5, 1. That's 1 inch. Oh, sorry, we want it to be 0.75. That's what was throwing me because it looked bigger. So we're going to the third one there. So we've got it 0.75 inches from the end, or 3 of these little boxes at 0.25 each. And again, we're going to make that a perforating line if we haven't already. And then we're going to select both of those and we're going to layer and group them. So now we can move that scored line independently. Now we need another couple of score lines over here, but these need to be the full inch in width. So again, I'm just pulling out and double clicking, and if we look at the size, we've got it exactly right, and we need to make that a perforating line. I'm going to go back onto the artboard and select 1/2 inches again for now, because we need to move that to the 1/2 inch from the edge. I'm going to make a duplicate before we do that, and I'm going to move it across, and we need it to be at 0.5 inches, and then I'm going to select both of those and I'm going to layer and group those. And then this last score line that we've got here needs to come 1¼ inches from this side. So 1¼ inches. So again, we're going to change that snap to grid to 1/4 inch so we can see where when we hit the. So that's the one, because we've got 4 little boxes, and one more across will be. So these are the 1/2 inches here, 1/2 inch, sorry, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4, 1 inch, and 1.25, which is 1¼ inches, like so. And again, we're just going to send this shape down to the back so we can see that our score line's still there, and we're going to select everything and we're going to layer and group, or you can do right click and group, it's entirely up to you. Right, so that's where we're up to next. So now we're going to bring in our triangle, and we need to adjust the size, and the size needs to be, let me just check my notes. The size needs to be 1.5 inches wide, and it needs to be 0.7 inches high. Sorry, 0.75 inches high. So that's the triangle that we're going to use, and we need to bring it to the front. I'm also going to make it a different colour so that we can see what we're doing with it. Okay, so the next thing I need to do from the edit menu is flip it on the vertical. So now we're going to move this into position. So I'm just going to line it up to my shape, and we need to move it so that this point is in line with this dotted line, and this point should line up to this dotted line. So we're just going to use that snap to grid function again, and that'll position it perfectly where we need it to be. Okay, now it might have been better to do this. We need to remove that, oh, not that one. If you get the wrong one, don't worry, just take it out again. What we're trying to do is remove this line here. It's not that one either. So we'll just go back a step, make sure we get it in the right position, and we'll I'm just going to do this while it's out in the open, and then I'll line it back up afterwards. So we're after getting rid of that line there. Okay, that cut line there. So now we just broke that line, and if we take off the colour, you'll see what I mean. Just go back to it being white, and you can see now we've just got this sort of position here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take you back a step, and I'll show you again what I did. So we'll go back to it being in there. So I double clicked with that line selected. I'm just going to click open the outline, and then that gets rid of that top node. So then I'm just going to change it back to white, so you can see now that that is just this shape. Now we are going to move this across and down so that it lines up. Now remember, once it's in position, and then we need to make it a scoring line. So basically, if I just now ungroup everything, edit and ungroup, layer and ungroup even, layer. Okay, we need to I'm actually going to group everything again, and I'm going to use my layers palette. So layer and group, and I'm going to go onto my layers. Let's have a look at our group now, what we've got, as we want to, that's the one. So we need to move this one up above that one, and then you can see we've actually got that score line that extends right up. It didn't really need to be showing it would cut, but it's just so that you can get the visual of what it looks like on there. So that is the third part of the mechanism. So now we've got, I'm just going to make sure everything's grouped. Yeah, it's all grouped together so I can move it independently. And I'm going to go on display and zoom fit to mat size. And there we've got parts 1, 2 and 3 of the mechanism for the card. So next we're going to work on the base card itself. And the base card needs to be a rectangle. So I'm just going to bring on the square because it's just as easy to do a square as a rectangle. And again, second one down, edit. And we're going to make this shape 8.5 inches high. And we're going to make it 5.75 sorry, 8.5 inches wide and 5.75 inches high, like so. Then that's the size of the base card. I'm going to make a duplicate of that, so you can either right click and duplicate, you can go on layer and duplicate, or I've made myself a shortcut for my Mac. So now I need to reduce the width of this by half, so that means it's going to be 4.25. Actually, we'll do it a different way. We'll use the snap to grid tool again. So again, I'm just going to move this across to the side. It's still on snap to grid, and I'm going to make it this time now to the let's put it on the 0.25. So again, we're going to make a perforating line, so we're going to use the path icon, and I'm going to click and drag down, double click to anchor, make it a perforating line, and then we need to place it in the middle of this line. So I'm going to scooch it along, and then you can see that that is now smack in the middle of that card. So I'm going to select everything, and I'm going to group, layer group, or again you could have done right click and group that way. So that's your base card size completed. Okay, so now I'm just going to move this out of the way so we've got a little bit of room to work on. And we're going to work on some of the matting layers. Right, first of all, for the front, we're going to make a frame. So we're going to go to our basic shapes again, and we're going to bring on this slightly rounded rectangle and bring that down. And we're going to resize. So we're going to go on the second icon down, which is edit, and we're going to resize to 1.25 inches high by 3.25 inches long. Oh, I will keep doing that. So 3.25 inches long, like so. Say OK. We don't want it 3.94, we want it to be 1.25. I'm sure I did that one, and seems to be messing me about a little bit today. So it's actually the other way around, so that needs to be 3. And that needs to be 1. All I did was just delete the 3, and it just took out the whole thing. It's acting bizarrely today. So that's going to be our front mat, if you will, for our greeting on the front. Now we're going to do a couple of things here. We're going to create our first offset line. So we're going to go on to, again, the edit, and we're going to create an offset, and we're going to go inwards, and we're going to go in by about 0.8 and say OK. Okay, then I'm just going to move that off to the side because that will be for our patterned paper layer. So I'm just going to change the colour so you can see. Then we need to create a frame from this. So we're going to, again, on the second icon, create an offset, and this time we want to come out, go in by about 0.24 maybe. Say OK. If that's too much, you can undo and make it slightly less. So I'm just going to make it slightly less. I think it was 0.2 that we did, not 0.24, and then say OK. That's looking better. So then we need to select both. And I'm going to subtract one from the other. We've just put in some colour, and you can see now we've made our frame. So this frame will then, that blue piece, you'll have a bit of gluing space underneath to do it, so you can add it without it showing once you've cut it out. And this way you're not going to see, I think I've just moved that, excuse me for 1 minute. So now I'm going to move those to one side. So now I've got that one. Then I'm going to create an offset of that shape. So again, onto this one, offset, say OK. Sorry. Create an offset, and we need it to be inward by a small amount. So we're going to go 0.4, say OK. And that should have put, if we zoom in, so I'm just going to zoom in on this particular shape that we've done. And if you can see, what we've done there is we've created an offset, but it offsets the in and the outer. And if we change that now to a dashed line, that puts us a nice stitched edge on it. Now what we will do is make that a drawing line, and it's important that you do that at this stage. So you've got your cut line and your drawing line, and this is the pattern paper that goes underneath. So I'm just going to select everything, and we're going to line it up centrally and vertically. So now the blue piece is directly underneath the grey piece, and I'm just going to temporarily group them, layer and group, and then I can make a duplicate by right clicking and duplicate, and then I'm going to ungroup both. So I'm going to ungroup, layer ungroup, or I can right click and say ungroup. So now we've got the shape for on the front for our greeting, and the shape from the inside for our greeting, if you will. Now I did make the inside greeting just slightly larger than the out one, but what I didn't do is use the frame. So I'm going to, oh excuse me, well I just got the wrong one. I'm going to select the frame, two parts, and remove it away from the other part underneath, because what I actually did was put the greeting on this foot, and I made a stitched edge for that. So I'm just going to select everything on that side now that belongs that shape, and I'm just going to again temporarily group it, and I'm just going to make it a little bit taller, because that's what I did. I just did it by eye, just made it a little bit taller, but then it does everything proportionally. Then I'm going to ungroup, and then on this blue shape we're going to create an offset again, an inward, and we want it to go just a small one, say OK, and we're going to change that to a drawing line, and then we've got that 4 stitch part for that. So we've got our, we'll cut that rectangle out and 4 stitch the rest. Right, so now we're on to the greeting. Now I used 2 different fonts for this. I'll show you how to do the first one, but then the second one is done exactly the same way, and we'll just do the one for the inside that says to say no to cake. So on the text icon we need to be able to see the text, and I used a font called Always Here, and it's a tall skinny one. So I clicked on there and I put to say, oops, try capital T, to say, and then I clicked off, and then I clicked on again to make another one, and then I put no to, and then I clicked off. So I rearranged those two together so one was directly above the other. So I selected both, and on this second icon I lined them up to the left, which then the N lines up to the end of the T like so, and that's how I liked it. So I'm then going to select both of those, and I'm going to layer and group them, and then I'm going to resize them down a bit because they obviously are a bit too big for now, but because they need to fit in here ultimately. So that's where they're going to go ultimately. So I just need to turn off. The reason it's not letting me maneuver it sort of thingy is because we've got the snap to grid on. Snap it off, and then it will let us move that to wherever we want. So I'm going to have that around there like so. So I want it roughly, and I've done it by eye. You could line it up using your line up tools if you wish, but I think I'm quite happy with the position there. So then the second font that I used, so again we need to be able to see the fonts, and we're going to choose the font tool, and this time the second one I used was the Better Together, and I typed the word cake like so. Now, a couple of things you need to be aware of. We need to fill it so that it's going to do a fill when you take it to your scan and cut. It also needs to be draw, and again this one also needs to be draw. So now I've got the no, say no to cake is on draw and cake is on draw. Then I'm just going to resize the cake to fit this side here, and I'm just going to make it a bit taller by stretching it down like so. So that's kind of how I did it. Now you could use the frame if you wish, but that's how I chose to do it. I just did it on a stitched layer like that. Now I did the Life's Too Short exactly the same way, but I just did Life's Too Short, and then I put Life's in the skinny font, which is the Always Here, and then Too Short is in the Better Together again. So that's those parts. Now I'm just going to display and zoom fit to mat so you can see everything we've done so far. So I'm just going to move, oops, I didn't want to do that. If you do accidentally separate them, undo it, because you do want to keep them separate so that your machine knows what it's doing, because if you group it, it seems to confuse the issue. So again, I'm just going to move everything out of the way so you can see what we're doing like so. And the next step is to just do a couple of matting layers for the front of the card. So that's what we're going to be doing next. Sorry, for the other part of the card, if you will. So I'm going to now do a couple of matting layers, and they will be, when I find them, 1.5, 1.25 by 3.25. So I'll need rectangles, bring that on, and I want it to be wide and height. So we need the height to be 3.25, so 3.25, and the width needs to be 1.25, oh, 5 even. We'll keep doing that. 1.25, say OK, and then that's going to form the bit that goes down diagonally, sorry, vertically to that piece on the front, as you saw on the front of the card. We need an offset layer for that one. We're going to go inwards by about 0.8 and say OK. So then we've got that matting layer for the front, so you could cut your patterned paper, you could put your matting layer, I used some glitter card on the back, and then on this front piece you could make that whatever pattern paper you're using. Okay, so that's that bit that will go onto that bit there on the front. as you're layering it up to make a little bit of a interest to your card. Now I didn't use a front layer, but you could if you wanted. I just did stamping on mine to create the effect of backing paper. But if you wanted to do, then instead of doing 2 of these next pieces, you would do 3, 1 for the front. So now I'm going to select the square again, and we're going to do the inside matting layers, which are 4 by 5.5. So again, second icon down, and we need them to be 4 inches wide by 5.5 inches high. So that's going to form a mat that will fit perfectly on that side, and obviously you'll do cut 2 of those for that. And if you did want a matting layer for the front, you'd obviously cut another one, so you'd need 3 of those, but I'm only going to just put 1 on because obviously you can just cut as many as you need and duplicate it in the machine. Right, so now we're on to the final part, which is the greeting where my cake was. So again, we're going to select a shape, so it's entirely up to you. I just did rectangles and then actually rounded them out using a corner tromper, but that's entirely your choice. So I think we'll go with a rounded rectangle, and it needs to be, let's just check, about let me just check the dimension because I've forgotten. It's about 2.5 wide, so 2.5 wide by 3.5 high, 3.5-ish. Like I say, it doesn't have to be exact. So this is the bit that will have the picture of the cake on the inside as part of the pop-up mechanism. You just need an offset for that. So again, inward by about 0.8, and that's giving you your layers. And again, you could put some nice cardstock for the back layer, and then you're going to have your stamped image, you know, whatever image you want to use on the front, and that will then stick in your card. So they're all the parts and pieces that you'll need. Like I said, the hardest part of this really was using that. Hopefully you've got an idea now how Snap to Grid will help you place and position score lines, etc., so that you can do this accurately. Right, so what you would do then is obviously go to File. Now you've got choices here. You can save it, but that saves it as a Brother Canvas workspace file that can't be imported to your Scan and Cut. Or you could export it from this mat to an FCM file and save it on your desktop, like so. And that's just because of the, so you could give that a name and save it. I've already done this, so I'm not going to do it again. Or you can say File and transfer SVM via the internet. That will send it directly to your Scan and Cut. This is coming up just because there's going to be something in your wording really that's really small and wouldn't cut, but it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. You won't even notice anything's missing. Just say OK, and then it sends it across and gives you a message that it's now arrived at your machine. Okay, so that's it for this spinner pop-up mechanism, if you will, for the card. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you'll have a go at making it. If you have liked the video, please remember to like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Remember to leave comments in the comment box below, and that the file is freely available over on my blog at beverly10.blogspot. So I'm sorry this one goes on a little bit, but I think because we're trying to learn a new skill with the Snap to Grid, some of you may well all be familiar with it, and other people won't, and how useful it can be. So that's it for now, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.